Hi everyone, I'm Thea and this is Sophie, and we both work for Choices. Choices is an under 18 substance misuse service. So basically we talk everything substance related, drugs and alcohol. We're here today to do an online session around substances, coping and COVID. The three come as a package. So we'll talk through the different issues that each one brings and how they affect one another, and then give advice at the end on how to deal with any substance use that is going on, and sort of tips to kind of keep yourself safe if you are using, or to pass on to other people if you know they are using. You'll hear our voices, but you won't see us. It's very different from what we're used to. We're used to coming into the schools and standing in front of a class or an assembly to give this information, and it's strange not being able to take questions at the end. However, when it gets to the end, you'll see that there are different platforms that you'll be able to contact us on, and I'm sure that if you ask your teachers, they would be able to forward questions to us via email. So yeah, just ask them. So sit back, relax and enjoy the workshop.
So today we're going to be going through this new PowerPoint, so craving, coping and COVID. The reason we've decided to talk about this is to raise awareness around substance use and COVID-19. So since COVID-19 has been around, so since last year, a lot of the young people that we support, or young people have spoken to us about their friends, have mentioned about how their drug use has changed, whether that's that they've been using more or less, or even changing their drug use. And it's about raising awareness around the risks of that. So before we go into any of that, I'm just going to explain a little bit about Choices, so the service that me and Thea work for. So what do Choices offer? Okay, so we are a service that's for under 18s. So our bulk of work is substance misuse. That's whether that young person is using substances themselves. And what we would do is make sure they're very much aware of the risks and the effects of those substances that they are taking or thinking about taking. The important part is that we are a confidential service, okay? Whatever that young person tells us, we don't go and pass that information on, one, unless they're happy for us to do that, or two, if they do raise concerns and that there are risks in regards to their own safety, well-being, we have a duty of care for that young person to make sure that they're safe. So we would have to pass that on. And if we did, we would let that young person know first as well. Okay, so we're non-judgmental, and we tailor the sessions to that individual. Okay, so if someone is smoking cannabis, we focus on cannabis information. A lot of our work is one-to-one. Okay, and we do see people wherever they feel most comfortable. So normally it'd be in colleges, school, and sometimes that can be at home as well. But obviously at the moment with coronavirus, home visits aren't going ahead. So at the moment we're a bit more creative. So we're doing telephone calls, video calls. However somebody is happy to kind of receive that support, we're more than happy to kind of accommodate. Okay, so our service is harm reduction advice and information. Okay, we're not there to kind of say no. Obviously the best information, if and advice for someone if they are using drugs to keep themselves safe, is to not use. But a lot of young people are going to continue to use either way, so it's about reducing the harm that drug is going to do to them, and we go through that information with them as well. When we are supporting them, we can signpost them to other services. So a lot of the young people that we support will often use substances to kind of help with their emotions. So there's a lot of kind of mental health issues that get raised up, especially around anxiety and depression. So what we'd often do then is we'd get mental health services involved to support them then as well. So learning objectives then for today is to raise awareness of substance use and COVID-19. So what is a drug? So a drug is a substance that is taken into the body that causes a change in body function, mood, feelings, thinking and or behaviour. So there are four main drug categories, okay, and these are divided according to their biological effect. And these main categories are known as stimulants. You might know them as uppers, depressants, so downers. Then you've got hallucinogens, okay, that make people see things and hear things that might not be there. And then you've got your opiates or opioids, okay. So these are your painkillers. Okay, so it's important to understand that drugs are present in our lives on a very daily basis. That's whether you get up in the morning and have a cup of coffee, or whether you smoke and you smoke tobacco or drink alcohol. These are all drugs, okay? But a lot of the drugs that we do talk about are illegal drugs, and it's also important to understand that there are also legal drugs, okay? So those would be things like your caffeine, so shock horror, energy drinks, are a drug, okay? It's just that they're a legal drug, okay? So that's an important thing to know. So I'm just going to move on to the different categories then. So what you've got is your depressants, okay? So depressants, it doesn't mean that they're going to make you depressed, okay? What it means is it slows down your central nervous system, making you feel calm and relaxed, okay? In high doses, though, they can cause feelings of drowsiness and pleasure. And some of the effects then from people that do use them is you can often tell if someone has used a depressant because of their speech. It becomes quite slurred, it could be quite slow. They might have some difficulty breathing. If someone has too much, in particular, if you think of alcohol, if someone has too much alcohol, it can cause them to vomit. And it can affect things like your vision then, so it can make it blurred. So to give you some idea of some of the drugs that fall under depressants would be things like your alcohol, your benzodiazepines. So this would be known as Xanax or Valium. So moving on then to your stimulants. So these stimulate the nervous system. So what that means is it gives you extra adrenaline. People use them, okay, and what it will often do is makes them feel less hungry or less tired. So if you think caffeine, some people will use caffeine to make them more awake in the morning, to give them maybe a little bit more energy. But the important thing to understand is that energy won't be there forever. It's for however long that drug is working on in their system, okay? But at high doses, then it can cause symptoms of anxiety and paranoia. And with some people then as well, depending on what drug they use, it can increase confidence and it increases your heart rate. So long-term effects then is because of the impact it has on the heart, it can cause some damage then, and you're more prone to have things like heart attacks. So to give you an idea then of some of the drugs that fall under the stimulants, those would be things like your cocaine, your caffeine, your MDMA, so you might know it as Molly or pills, most young people will call it. Your nicotine would fall under this, and amphetamine, so speed, you might know that as. So hallucinogens then, okay? So hallucinogens will make people see things and hear things that aren't there, so get hallucinations or delirium, okay? So to give you an idea of some of the drugs that fall under this would be your acid, your LSD, your cannabis, your magic mushrooms, ketamine and DMT, okay? And the effects from using these are, obviously it's going to affect time and movement. It could slow it down or speed it up. It can make people see things and hear things that aren't there. That can be quite scary. So you might have heard of sometimes people having bad trips. And with that, especially with hallucinogens, they do last a while. You're not looking at 5, 10, 15 minutes. You're looking at hours. So if someone does have a bad trip, they have to go through that for the couple of hours that drug lasts, and there's no way of stopping it. So it's really important when people are using these drugs that they are aware of these effects that can happen. And that's when people don't expect that effect, that experience that they're going through, it can make them really anxious. And the last category then is opiates, or known as opioids. So both opiates and opioids are used for their pain-killing effects. Both can ease emotional pain as well as physical pain. They provide an all-round numb, euphoric sensation that many people find desirable. So it can relieve pain and it gives that feeling of being kind of wrapped in a blanket. There is a difference between opiates and opioids. So opiates are natural and come from the poppy plant. So some examples of this would be things like heroin, opium, and codeine, while opioids are synthetic, which means that they are man-made drugs that provide an opiate-like effect. So some examples of these would be your fentanyl, your methadone, and your oxycodone.
So substances are used for a variety of reasons. You know, you ask a young person why they use, they say it's because they enjoy it. But you dig a little bit deeper and you'll find that young people will use substances to manage their emotions. They could have gone through a number of traumatic experiences in their past, which are now impacting on their moods. And currently with COVID, when you've got a lot of people feeling isolated, alone and things like that, you often find that they are using to cope with those things. Okay, now using substances to deal with your emotions seems good at the time, and for a short period you do feel a little bit better. However, when the substances stop working, those problems are still there, and sometimes they feel a lot worse, especially if you're suffering with withdrawals, hangovers and things like that, which make your moods 10 times worse. So we always encourage young people to be a bit more positive in how they're managing their emotions. At some time in all of our lives, we'll experience an emotional or mental health problem. How we deal with that is individual, and not everyone will agree to the choices that we make. So for some people, if they're using substances, a lot of people won't approve of that. However, it works for those people at that time, to deal with anxiety, stress and depression. But like I say, it works for a while, but eventually, there's going to be a lot of issues in terms of mental health because of the substances as well. And COVID-19 has certainly had a big impact on people's mental health. It's caused a lot of negative feelings. The rate of suicide has increased through the coronavirus pandemic. We can't see family and friends. We're more isolated. We're anxious about what's going on. There isn't any clear cut sort of idea of when it's going to end, and all we hear is that things are getting worse. So it's quite difficult to deal with, and a lot of people will use substances as a result of that. The problem is, because they're isolated, they're using alone. And, Sophie mentioned that there's a risk of overdose with, most of the substances. You can overdose on alcohol, you can overdose on speed, on cocaine, you can overdose on opiates and things like that. And if you're using alone, if you're on your own, then there's more chance of that actually killing you rather than somebody being there, to help you out or to get the ambulance to you. So even though you're not really allowed to see people, it would be a good idea if, you are using, that people know that you're using and they can check in on you. Rather than you using on your own and something really bad happening. But if you are trying not to use, obviously you can come through to ourselves, or if you're suffering with mental health issues, there's plenty of services around like Mind and Young Minds, which, you can Google, it's all online, and they should be able to help you deal with the thoughts and feelings. There's plenty of positive ways to deal with your mental health issues. It's been researched and it's been proved that exercise actually makes, the dopamine or the good feeling chemicals, the serotonin increase, and you feel better after doing exercising, after talking, after walking, after cycling, after being creative. Even there's plenty of ways to deal with mental health that doesn't involve substances. Like I said, after a while, the drugs add to the emotional and mental health issues. Okay. One of these reasons is that some of the drugs that are used will lower the dopamine levels in your brain, which means that you are lower than you were before you started using. Especially with cocaine, for example, the uptake of the dopamine after it's been released is a lot less than what it was when it was released. So you're going to feel a lot lower afterwards, and you have that come down as well. But the more you use, the more dependent that you become on the substance. With this, it brings its own issues, because the more dependent you are, if you then are isolated and you can't get hold of the substance, you then start to feel a lot of, paranoia and anxiety and depression because you can't get the substance to help you with that. These episodes can carry on for a little while, and they certainly will become more common with long-term and heavy use. It's a bit like a vicious circle, you know, it starts with you feeling really rubbish, then you might feel okay for a bit, but as that starts wearing off and maybe you can't find that substance, it goes back to you feeling worse again, and actually, you know, that circle gets deeper and deeper the worse that you're feeling. Tolerance is a big thing. You know, in terms of your dependence, it'll depend on your tolerance. You know, when somebody repeatedly uses substances over time, your body reacts to the drug, and it builds up a barrier in your body. So it's a bit like a dam to water. You know, the first time you use, the water is free flowing, but then as you carry on using, a dam is built up, so you need more and more of the drug every time to feel the effects. That means then that when it gets to a certain point, you kind of no longer feel the effects from the substance anymore. You're still getting stoned or high or whatever, but you don't necessarily feel it. So it could be that you move on to other substances which are harder, I suppose, in some people's minds, to actually try to feel the effects again. So you're swapping from one drug to another. So again, you're increasing your risk of overdose. If you stop, you know, using a substance for a while, there's a risk of overdose because your tolerance levels decrease. So, you know, whatever you're using, and especially in lockdown, if you haven't been able to get your substances for a while, so that maybe you haven't used pills since before lockdown, if you went back and used the same amount that you were doing before when your tolerance was higher, you're more at risk of overdose. So the levels that you use need to be a lot lower than they were before lockdown, and that goes for any substance. You know, go slow, go low, and you know, only use a small amount if you are going to use again. And obviously, if you feel like the substances aren't working for you anymore, your tolerance is very high, so maybe you need to speak to somebody about that. If you don't have the substance, you know, and you have a high level of use, you will get withdrawal symptoms, and you can get these from even cannabis. You know, some drugs will have quite significant withdrawal symptoms. So if you're alcohol dependent, you know, and you stop using, you can have fits, you know, so that's really dangerous. You have the same sometimes with the benzodiazepines as well. Even with cannabis, you know, you get the different types of withdrawal symptoms. The psychological ones are the, you know, the increased anxiety and depression, paranoia, you know, feeling isolated, having headaches, having stomach problems, having you know, like an increased anger then, you know, so you're lashing out to people because you know, you're not using. But, you know, you'll have a lot of physical ones as well, you know, so you might feel like you're having a panic attack, you might feel really sick, you might have, you know, you might feel really sort of tense because you're not using, and that's all because that drug is leaving your system, because you are dependent on it. Your body is kind of chosen to rely on it to feel normal. You know, you develop, you know, levels of dependence quite quickly depending on what you're using. But the withdrawal symptoms will come on just as quickly, and you will start to feel really horrible for a while, and this obviously then can impact on your mental health. So overdose is exactly what it says on the tin. You know, the dose of any substance that you take is related to your desired effect. So, you know, if you are looking to enjoy with your friends, you need a small amount just to get that buzz. But if you take too much, you know, you increase your risk of that drug taking over your body and stopping you from breathing, stopping your heart from pumping and things like that. You know, if you use too much, you normally have those early signs of overdose. So like with alcohol, if you've drunk too much, you go sick. You know, if you have too much, say, cocaine or anything like that, you have heart palpitations, you feel really anxious. You know, you have those signs of overdoses before it, you know, it actually gets to the critical point. So that's where you pull back and you don't use anymore, you know, but you need to try and be in control of your use. Otherwise the overdose can be fatal. And, you know, there are a lot of young people who have died from overdoses because they haven't been aware of their tolerance levels, you know, because they haven't been aware of maybe what they're using. Sometimes pills especially are really unknown in terms of what's in them, and that can cause somebody to have really bad experience or even an overdose from it. You know, it could be unintentional, although however sadly we have had some, you know, intentional ones as well as accidental ones. So it's important to know your tolerance and know, you know, what you can deal with each one, and keep low and slow so that you don't end up in a mess really. The issue that we've got added on to all the other issues that come with substance misuse is that now that COVID is in place, there is a higher risk of contracting COVID-19 through your drug use. Now, drugs themselves will lower your immune system, so you're more likely to catch infections. You're more likely, again, to catch it if you are sharing equipment, if you're sharing, snorting equipment, if you're sharing needles or things like that. If you're sharing joints, you could be passing the COVID-19 on from one person to another. And what you could have essentially is that one person has affected their whole friendship group because they've passed around that joint or whatever, or they've been too close. It's all airborne, which is why they say have a 2 meter distance, have the windows open if you're at home, wash your hands and things like that. So if you're in close contact or if you're sharing anything, you are going to be passing on potentially COVID-19, which then can spread out a lot more than that. So if you're with your friends, you pass it to them, they go to their families, they pass it to them, and so on and so on. So you could have quite a big problem, which is what we saw around Wales not so long ago, because people were spending too much time together. So the key issues are the same with all the COVID things, the space and stuff, but also on top of all the harm reductions and stuff we've got from the substances as well, which is something that we constantly sort of talk about. We are harm reduction based, so we're not the type of service who says you have to stop using straight away, because we know that that's not possible. But what we can do is give the information to stay safe. Don't use alone. Obviously there is that high risk of overdose. Unfortunately with COVID, most people are isolated, but like I said, if you can just check in with someone and just say you are going to use, somebody can check in on you and make sure that you're okay if you are using. That could be one of the choices team. It could be a friend or family that you trust. It just needs to be someone so that they know you're doing it. If you have a break in use, then you need to reduce the use when you go back to it if you haven't been able to pick up for a while. So the go low, go slow thing will come into this as well to stop you from ending up in a mess if you haven't used for a little bit. Again, you don't know what's in half the substances. They could have been laced with things, so you need to test it beforehand. So it's just taking a small amount before you carry on, so that you know what the effects are. And again, the same things with the COVID-19. Wash your hands, have space from people, try not to get too close, try not to share equipment. If you're drinking, space out the drinks, have some soft drinks in between so that you can work out how drunk you're getting. If you've got a pill or if you've got powder, dab it and wait. If it's a pill, crush it first and dab and wait. Keep hydrated whatever you're using, because water is really, really important to stop you from getting dehydrated. Stick within your tolerance. You will remember and you will enjoy more if you stick to your tolerance and you use smaller amounts, because you're going to feel those effects for longer in terms of your use if you keep it controlled. Otherwise you are going to be looking for a higher amount, or you're going to be looking for other substances to feel the effects. Make sure you're eating, you get enough sleep, and all that's going to be beneficial to your mental health in the long run. There's plenty of things that you can be doing to keep yourself safe, keep yourself occupied, and a lot of that will be getting outdoors and having some fresh air, even if it's a socially distanced cycle or walk with your friends. There's a lot that you can be doing to keep yourself happy and safe in these lockdowns.
We've come to the end and we're on a page now where we're looking at how to get in touch with us. There are different ways that you can get in touch with us for extra support or even a referral. We have our Choices page on Facebook. We have a Choices page on Instagram, each of which has loads and loads of information that's posted week by week. Sophie, for one, posts about different substances weekly. So there's always a lot of harm reduction advice on there. There's also a YouTube channel as well where videos are posted that we've done similar to this. Obviously on each of the social media pages, you're able to drop a message for us to get back in touch with you. Our Barod website has a link to a web chat, which is always manned by a Barod worker. If anyone needs a referral, they can go onto the web chat, they can request a referral, and obviously you'll say which area you're from and it'll come through to us. Any numbers that you need are on the next slide. We have our Choices single point of contact number. if you phone that, it'll go through to a Choices admin. What they'll do then is they'll take a referral over the phone, or they'll take your query over the phone, and then they'll go to the sort of relevant team. You've got Yahida, which you can get in touch with, if emotionally you're sort of struggling with things, especially through COVID. This, it's become more sort of common that people are needing that extra support. There's different numbers like Childline, which you can access, and obviously if you're feeling at crisis point, there's plenty of websites online that you can access, and numbers like Samaritans, and things like that. If you needed any extra support in terms of getting in touch with Choices, you can always ask your youth worker or your teacher. Even parents can ring us, you can contact us. There's plenty of ways, whether it's online or telephone, that you can get in touch with us. So I hope that you've taken something away from the talk today. Obviously, if you need any more support, get in touch, but we're hoping to be able to do something like this again soon, to be able to give you a bit more extra information. There is an evaluation of which we'll send out a link, and we hope that as many of you as possible will fill that in. So until then, keep safe, and we'll see you soon.